I have very happy news for you. All the work's over. All the efforting is completely ended. The natural state of human beings is totally pure, love-filled, filled with wisdom, and filled with tremendous energy to be of benefit to oneself and others. So that's the natural state. It's what we are. It does not require any effort whatsoever to accomplish that, as it's already present. So if we make an effort to accomplish that through trying to exhaust our faults and perfect our qualities, we're always looking away from that which we are. Who we are is already here. It's already present, and it's all that we are. We've never been made into anything other than that. Within total primordial purity, there has never been impurity. So if we're attempting to purify what's already pure, we're involved in a hopeless task. So, many of us learn this from the time we're born, that we need to have more positive thoughts, have more positive emotions, and have less negative emotions, have less negative thoughts, and have less negative experiences. So we spend our whole life using all of our energy to try to rearrange those appearances of thoughts, emotions, and experiences in order to make them into pleasant experiences or worthwhile experiences or appearances, or to feel good about ourselves in relation to others in the world we live in. Now, just because this is what we've learned, it doesn't mean that that's the way it is. So basically what we learn to do with what appears is to either indulge it, whether it's our thoughts, emotions, or experiences, to avoid it, or to replace it with something else. Those are the three things we learn. However, today we're here to talk about another approach that has been part of humankind throughout its history, and that is simply to get acquainted with the natural purity of our being. The natural purity of our being, our connection with that, is awareness. The awareness by which we know we are. That's our natural connection with total love, total wisdom, total purity, total well-being, total excellence in our lives in terms of our strengths, gifts, and talents, and the total ability and capacity to benefit ourselves and others with that. So it's our awareness alone that is the resource bank, so to speak, of that. There's no other resource. There's nothing to be accomplished. If we're trying to accomplish it by looking away from that, then we're always one step away, no matter how much we do. But if we just get acquainted with that awareness, bare and naked as it is, then what we find in that is that all of these faults we believe we have, that they are transmuted in wisdom. If we look at something as a fault, it is a fault. But when it appears, if we rest as awareness, if we just allow the natural awareness that's absolutely obvious, fully evident, and certain at all times to be as it is, then we see that whatever we think of, whether it's a fault or anything else, whatever emotion we have, whatever experience we have, it appears in, of, as, and through awareness and nothing else. And that is the transmutation of appearances in wisdom. Wisdom and awareness are equal. Wisdom, love, and awareness are equal. Wisdom, love, awareness, and tremendous energy for great benefit are equal. They do not lie in cause and effect relationships. As awareness is entirely uncaused, everything that appears is awareness and is also uncaused. So the idea that there is cause and effect is just an appearance. It's simply an appearance. And if we attempt to affect our thoughts, emotions, and experiences through different causes, either indulging them, avoiding them, or replacing them with something else, then we're living in an entirely make-believe world. It may be made more pleasant, and we may neutralize certain appearances in some sense of negative thoughts and emotions if we either avoid them or replace them with something else, but we will never transmute them in timeless wisdom through that approach. It will never happen. It can absolutely never happen. So from flawless awareness, when we see all as flawless awareness, all becomes flawless awareness more and more, no matter how long we live. The only freedom there is, so to speak, is the freedom of complete perceptual openness in all experience. And that complete perceptual openness is timeless awareness itself. And our connection with it is the awareness that we are and nothing else. We've never been anything other than awareness. We've never been made into anything other than awareness. And what we are is so beyond labeling words or descriptions that there's no way to get there. We can slightly understand through words and descriptions, but we can never really realize who we are through words and descriptions. Actually, there's nothing at all that needs to be done. There truly is nothing that needs to be done. There's no seeking that needs to be sought. There are no descriptive efforts that need to be made. In fact, if you just kept coming here or listening to the free downloads on the internet and reading the teachings and did nothing else, absolute certainty would dawn in you that this is who you are, because you already are who you are. It's just that we so rarely hear in a very direct way who we are that everybody misses the boat, so to speak. And the boat is already here. It's never been anywhere else. We're not someone headed to a destination of complete openness, wisdom, love, freedom, excellence in all we do. We're not someone heading to the destination of that. We already are that. And whether or not there's anyone heading there, well, you know, who cares? You know, when we just get familiar with who we are, all these philosophical questions and inquiries are answered forever, just in the immediacy of our own being. So just that, allowing certainty to dawn within you simply by exposure to what's true about yourself, is the most unerring instruction that can be given. And if that's something you feel you can't have trust in, just that certainty that it will come about without you doing anything, then rest is awareness for short moments, repeated many times until it becomes automatic, just in an uncontrived way. And what that means is that when an appearance comes up, rather than getting involved in seeking something in the appearance or describing something about it, to just allow the ease of awareness as it is to be the case, as it already is the case. And in that, you will see in a very definitive fashion that awareness has complete mastery over appearances, no matter what they are, no matter how afflictive they are and whether they seem to be inner or whether they seem to be outer. Awareness has complete mastery over all appearances. And this is guaranteed, you know, it's absolutely guaranteed. There's no one anywhere who can say, I'm not aware. There's not a single human being who can say, I'm not aware. So this is a message anyone can understand. It doesn't matter who they are. And this message, it's not tied to any kind of conventional systems or organizations or institutions. We can't really say that it's anything, as it's completely inexpressible and cannot be described in any way. There's no way to say what it is. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we cannot say it's religious, we can't say it's spiritual, we can't say it's philosophical or psychological or anything else. Once we say it's one of those things, then we've sort of entered a trap. What we could say, if we wanted to talk about it in a simple human way, is that this is what human beings are, everyone. And it doesn't need to be locked up in categories or authority structures or institutions. Now, here are a few things I learned when I was a girl. First of all, I learned, among many things. One thing I learned was that everyone wants to love and be loved. I learned this. Everyone wants to love and be loved. And then I learned another thing. I learned that everyone wants to belong. So everyone wants to love and be loved and belong. In other words, to not be ostracized or set aside in any way. And then the third thing that I learned, and I saw in absolutely everyone, I'm the eldest of 6 children, so in all my brothers and sisters and my friends, everyone, I could see this. I could see that everyone had tremendous gifts, that they had tremendous gifts to give, and that it was through love that these gifts would be recognized and come about. And so I knew these things, but I didn't really know anything much about practically applying them until I was older. But wherever I went, I kind of looked at what I saw in these terms. I thought, well, gee, this is interesting, because everywhere I go, school, family, church, other institutions and organizations, government, the laws, all of these things, they're not organized this way, These things aren't organized this way. They're not organized this way at all. In fact, they're organized as structures of fear, saying, if you don't toe the line and behave like everybody else, then you won't be loved, and you won't be able to love us, and you won't belong here, so we'll send you away. And, how could we possibly know about our own strengths, gifts, and talents in an atmosphere like that? It just couldn't ever possibly come about, and it never will come about in an atmosphere like that. So, from the time I was young, I had this deep belief that there was a way for people to be in such a way. And that because there is something about each of us that is only love, that if we just get familiar with that love, then all of these other things become possible. With knowing ourselves as love, then our families, our communities, our institutions, our countries, our world become love-filled. We realize that in ourselves, and then we realize it's possible for everyone else. And then everything, no matter what it is, can become love-filled. And I stayed with this belief until it became an actuality. So, I know that it's true. I know that today I'm a participant, one of many participants in this worldwide organization of great freedom that is an institution that is filled with love and caring, where everyone is mutually supported to succeed no matter who they are. No matter who they are, it doesn't matter who they are. And no one in great freedom can ever send anyone else away. No one can ever say, you don't belong here, you'll have to leave. But if anyone wants to leave, we just say, oh, we love you. Come on back anytime you want to. So now this is the reality of living. And, it may seem inconceivable, but it's absolutely so. And this entire group of people all over the world came about through flawless awareness, maintaining flawless awareness, transmuting all in primordial wisdom, transmuting all appearances in primordial wisdom, and thus became love-filled and love-capable. So you see, this is just the way it is. This is the natural state of people everywhere. There's no one left out. It's no great mystery. It isn't rocket science. It doesn't require yet another task-filled life of endless doing to achieve perfection. It is just a matter of natural relating with other people who are living in the same way, living in such a way that it is so obvious, so authoritative, and so convincing that others say, wow, that's who I am too. This is possible for me. So you see, what we are, it's very simple. We can talk about it in all kinds of terms, but the terms that it's talked about in can never really describe it. All we know is that in flawless awareness, in just allowing flawless awareness to be the case just as it is in every moment of life, that love just permeates everywhere, that it pervades everything, that it's completely unstoppable, that there's never a moment that is unloving. So, you know, this is who we are, and this is what naturally comes about. And as I said, just by basking in the truth of who you are in a very simple way, the certainty about that dawns in you in a way that is completely beyond words. In other words, you can't say how it came about. You can't say, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this other thing, and then I spent 5 years doing this, and boom. You can't say any of that. You can't say how it came about. What has never come about can't be made to come about. It just cannot be made to come about. And so the circumstance of knowing this about ourselves is very simple, direct, and straightforward. It's not something that we have to strive or effort for. What is unachieved and unachievable is the innate reality of our being, that reality of our being that has never depended on anything else. So, you know, who we are, the reality of our being that is completely love-filled and spacious and wide open. It's never been made into any appearance. Not any appearance. It's not been made into this or these. It's not been made into the air or the sun or the earth or the universe or anything else. Anything we can perceive of or conceive is simply an appearance within our awareness. So the universe or universes or whatever they may be, all these ideas we have that are appearances, they're all appearances of our own awareness. And that timeless awareness is not dependent on any of those appearances. This is very simple and straightforward. And even if it seems like you've been making a lot of effort to attain this, or you have attained this, whichever way you think about it, that either it's something you need to effort to attain or that it has been attained, it's neither. It can't be said to be attained or that any effort will attain it. You see, neither of those positions needs to be taken. Awareness is forever without extremes. Just like the purity of space is aspectless, so too awareness is aspectless. The moment we try to hold to an aspect like I've attained or there's something to attain, then we're lost in that little netherworld of whatever it is. We don't need to take up a position anywhere. The flawlessness of everything just as it is guarantees that we're always totally free in relation to whatever appears. the dance and song of awareness as it appears, it's simply the self-appearance of awareness, the self-song of awareness. All sounds, no matter what they are like a sound and an echo. And all appearances, no matter what they are, they're like a dream. Now, I used a very specific word when I said both of those things. I said like a dream and like an echo. I didn't say a dream and an echo. So this is a mistake that's often made, to say it is a dream or all sounds are an echo. We can't really even say that. They're like a dream. They're like an echo. We can't really describe what this is in any way. If we say it is a dream, we've adopted a position of nihilism. We've said, well, it's a dream, there's nothing, everything comes from nothing and leads to nothing. And so if we say like a dream, well, we don't have to say anything about what appears. All we can, in a very basic way, say about what appears is that everything that appears, look around, it's distinct and clear, it's absolutely vivid as it is, and it is absolutely forever empty of an independent origin. It has no independent nature. So this vivid appearance that is so distinct and clear is forever empty of an independent nature. It's never been made into something. It's always and forever stainlessly flawless, timeless awareness and nothing else. It's always and forever stainless, flawless wisdom and nothing else. This can only be realized in the immediacy of our own being, in the complete perceptual openness of all experience. We don't have to entertain or scrutinize or speculate about any philosophical assumptions whatsoever. Just in the definitive conclusion of our own being, the ease of our own being just as it is, and familiarizing with that, it becomes more and more certain, no matter how long we live, so that we're not going anywhere. There's no one going anywhere. In timelessness, there's no one going anywhere. There's no sequence of events in timelessness. Everything that you want to understand about cause and effect and the relationship of cause and effect with the uncaused and the unaffected and how those are not two, those things can never be understood from philosophy books. It can only be understood in the immediacy of our own being, the complete perceptual openness in all experience. Then all those things we've read, we come to understand them in a straightforward way that involves no intellectual speculation whatsoever. So this is the good news. This is the good news. It's very good news. It's such good news. I used to be a very hard worker. In my youth, I was a very hard worker. And I accomplished a lot. I efforted and I achieved, and I efforted and I achieved, and I efforted and I achieved, and I efforted and I achieved until I was 28 years old, and I said, well, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do for an encore after all this efforting and achievement? And things looked very bleak because I could see ahead of me that all there was more effort and achievement leading absolutely nowhere. That my ideas that at some time I would feel like I had achieved, or that I had reached satisfaction and fulfillment, that I'd finally become an adult. It never happened. It really never happened. Oh dear, that was dismal. That was a very dismal moment when I realized that. But it was also wonderful because it was really the crux of the matter. There's nothing that can be achieved. That was the crux of the matter. And all kinds of things happen then, this, that, and the other thing, great turmoil, confusion, desperation, bewilderment. And in all of these appearances that seemed so upsetting and like they'd never end, and so hopeless and desperate, I finally realized that all of these appearances, no matter what they are, they have the same underlying basis. And that basis is not something separate from them. It is them. It's not separate at all. And that when I just rested as that great relief that is the basic space of everything, it just became natural in an effortless way to experience my own being just as it is, without needing to make anything out of it. I'd never read any books on non-duality, so I didn't have any philosophical Band-Aids to put on it. I just would think, wow, this is incredible. You know, this is really amazing that all of these things I've been distracted from all of my life, that they've never been distractions in any way. There's never been anything to look for or achieve anywhere. It's already absolutely present, and I didn't really even know what to call it. It was just total relief, and in that, total love. The more relief there was that was experienced, the more I just felt wide open and loving and compassionate. So all these things I'd always thought about, to love and be loved, to belong, all of that was realized in just the simple relief that is the complete ease of our own being. There's nowhere else to look. If we're looking anywhere else, it'll never be found. If we're looking anywhere else, we're always at least one step away, or maybe many steps away. But doesn't it seem that this would be the way it is, that we already are who we are, so how could that be a difficult task? How could knowing who we are be a difficult task when we already are who we are? Silly, isn't it? And how could it be that we'd have to place ourselves in yet another circumstance where we were afraid of being excluded if we didn't toe the line, or where we had to act in a certain way in order to be loved and be accepted? The great mother of everything is very kind. Really. It's never been any other way. If you think it's some other way, come here and see me again. You know, have you ever heard of the Marquis de Sade? Now, I'm not departing from what we're talking about here. Well, the two concepts of sadism and masochism came out of the Marquis de Sade. So S&M, it's commonly called S&M. But you know, really, when we believe in all the appearances, that's what we're living a life like that. S&M, that's what it is. Because we're constantly sadistically punishing ourselves with all our appearances and being punished by them. So we live a whole life of discipline and punish, discipline and punish, discipline and punish. And I tapped into some things with people here, but that's okay. Yeah. all we are is the all-encompassing peer view of awareness that is inclusive of all points of view, no matter what they are. And if we're attempting to avoid the points of view that are primordially pure or replace them with something else, so we're replacing one that is primordially pure with another that is primordially pure, just like the aspectless sky. Do you see what I'm saying? We live a life of discipline and punish, discipline and punish. This is just what our whole life is about, huh? You didn't know we'd be talking about the ultimate form of S&M today, did you? Would anyone like to ask a question? All right, even sexual fantasies are primordially pure. There's nothing to worry about, no matter what your own circumstantial points of view are. They're already primordial wisdom, and to see them as some kind of other thing, no matter what they are, to see them as somehow separate, as though they have somehow existed separate and apart from the total love and purity of everything, is to be very far from realizing who we are. So, you know, what I suggest to people is just let your thoughts and emotions be whatever they are, and enjoy the ease of your own being in relation to these appearances. And the more that you do so, the more it will become absolutely clear to you that there is no division anywhere, that all appearances, no matter what they are stainlessly pure. Questions?
Can you elaborate on what it is, if it's possible to do so, that initially prevents us from seeing the clarity, from being established, from that creates this veil?
Well, first of all, the veil is primordially pure. The veil is flawless awareness. The veil itself is flawless awareness. There's never been anything in flawless awareness, never been anything at all. And when we talk about what comes about for us as human beings, is we just learn from other human beings, that's all. We learn that we are somebody and we're separate from other people. And we learn to use our awareness in a specific way. We learn to use our awareness to hold to what appears and then discriminate about it, to say this is good or this is bad. And thus it's something to either accept or reject. And once we do that, we throw ourselves into seeming confusion. But even the confusion or the veil or the non-recognition of awareness, all these ever are appearances of awareness. If we think there is a thing like a veil in our way or non-recognition of awareness in our way, then that's okay. Just repeatedly enjoy the ease of being, and it will become clear that these two are awareness. There's never been anything other than that.
But is there but why the play, so to speak? Why the initial, if there's such a thing as probably not, of this whole thing occurring the way it does?
Well, that's a good question, and I'll tell you what the conclusion is that I've come to and I share. I don't need to understand. There's no one to understand that. The minute I attempt to understand what could never possibly be understood, then I begin to enter a philosophical construct. However, if just staying with the ease of our own being, everything that becomes clear, the answer to that question becomes totally clear. But there's no way to describe what that is. Let's talk about it in very simple human terms. We all are born here, and then we gradually learn that everything is separated, that we learn dualist perception, and that comes about very gradually. We aren't born knowing that. We're born wild and free and spontaneous, crying when we want to, smiling when we want to, staring at everybody like, oh, wow, isn't that the most incredible thing I've ever seen? You know how a baby will just look at anybody? It could be an axe murderer or Gandhi, The baby's just, oh, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So this is how we're born, and this is who we always are. And we simply learn then, very, very gradually, to use our awareness to focus on objects, to focus on the appearances. And in the same way, we can become certain about who we really are. So we gradually learn that we are somebody, that we're separate from everybody else, that all of our thoughts and emotions really mean something, and that they need to be paid attention to, and that we have to be forever vigilant like a good taskmaster, standing over ourselves and making sure we know which is the good one, which is the bad one. And so we very gradually learn that. It takes a very long time for that to come about. A child cannot even conceptualize about those things in a conceptual way until they're 7 years old. So it takes that long for conceptualization to become something that a human being can do. Well, becoming familiar with the certainty of who we are takes far less time than that, because we already know who we are. And when we're exposed to that certainty with authority and conviction, then it naturally comes about very swiftly. Do you want to ask something else about that? Any other questions you might have?
Well, again, the step-by-step that you just went through of being born and being a child and being unaware, and then slowly becoming more aware of this, what one would call an ego or a false self, which is, in fact, awareness. Why does one have to, it's not even a why, I understand that, but the fact that one does become aware less and less of what one really is and becomes more aware of what one is not. And then strives to go back to knowing what one really is again, that's what one is to again surface after having initially surfaced, and then apparently moving away from that into a false identification, and then going back into the clear awareness of what one truly is, again surfacing. It seems like why this roller coaster ride, so to speak?
There's only a roller coaster ride if we believe there is. Do you see what I'm saying? So if we get into the point of view that it is a roller coaster ride, then it will be, and it'll feel hopeless in a way, like, wow, this can never happen for me, because my thoughts and emotions, they just keep coming, whatever they are.
But the fact that they even come.
Mm-hmm.
They even come, this false sense of moving out of pure awareness
Mm-hmm.
into something that is apparently no longer, and as you say, we can accept that it all is, but why the appearance of lacking in pure awareness? Why even that?
There is no appearance of lacking in pure awareness. There's only awareness with all of its dynamic energy. Just think of
It's
it.
here, though. Well, I shouldn't say that. But if you look into the world, there are so many that are seeking something that they are.
That's
and
true.
Yet they don't know that. They don't know it.
I agree with you. I've been everywhere. I've seen it all. Believe me, I've seen it all. I know exactly what's going on. and I also know that in great freedom there are many, many people who have realized who they are. Many, many people. So I know that it seems like it is one way, but I also know that it doesn't have to be that way, and that it isn't that way. And many times when we start seeking for something, we consider ourselves flawed and like we need to be fixed. And because we consider ourselves flawed and like we need to be fixed, then we find an institution to go to where everyone there will say you're flawed and you need to be fixed.
What is it initially that allows us to think that we're flawed and need to be fixed?
Do we need to know that? Do we need to know that definitively? We can say, we speculate, well, that we're exposed to other human beings and their points of view, and then we adopt those points of view. But it's so simple. We don't need to understand or know anything, because we can never know what anything is. So the moment we attempt to know what something is, then we feel confused. We have a seeming sense of confusion as soon as we attempt to know what anything is, because it's impossible to know what anything is. So the very simple way to understand yourself is that you are all-encompassing awareness. You've never been anything other than all-encompassing awareness. Within that awareness, which could be considered the pure view, there are appearances of points of view, and all those points of view are pure, no matter what they are. So anything you seek to understand, anything you name or label about yourself or anyone else, or the world you live in, or religion, spirituality, philosophy, whatever it is, they're all points of view within awareness, and they're all primordially pure. Whether they're spiritual points of view or non-spiritual points of view, they're primordially pure. And what that means is that the description of the appearance itself is forever empty of anything. It's pure. It's forever empty of anything. And the appearances don't need to try to be rearranged in order to make life comfortable. It's in not rearranging the appearances that and seeing that they're fine just the way they are, that everything just as it is complete, that we then know wisdom. We know the wisdom that is penetrating, authoritative, convincing, completely beyond any need for philosophical frameworks, including our own. And all the questions, why, who, what, where, when, how, all these things, these are just all points of view and awareness. Just in the ease of your own being, allow all these points of view just to be as they are, without any need to seek anything in them, to seek to understand. We can never understand the reality of our being. we can completely enjoy the reality of our being all of our lives, but we'll never understand it. No matter how great our cities or powers become, we'll never understand it. And there's no need to, there's absolutely no need to. Everything is okay just as it is. And when we place ourselves in a circumstance where we're supported in that, then it becomes more and more evident in us. Nothing needs to be done. I've said that probably 100 times today so far. But really, nothing needs to be done. Absolutely nothing needs to be done. From love is love. You place yourself in a loving circumstance, and love comes naturally in that. When that is what is affirmed about who you are, and you're supported with unerring instruction and just allowing the ease of your own being, it becomes obvious very quickly. And why all the other happened, who? Yeah. I don't need to know. David, did you have something?
So I think mine is, for me, a little bit moving from what I've been holding as theoretical to applied. For example, I notice that when I'm sitting at dinner, I've eaten a full meal, I feel very full, and I notice that I want a dessert. And it seems to me like I require some discipline, some changing of what is, in order to keep myself feeling good. I seem to find plenty of places in my life where I need to apply discipline. Sweets is one of those, because I have a tendency when I let things go to eat them when I don't need to and make myself not feel well. So that's just one example of many in my life where I feel something positive about discipline. I feel like it helps me. Mm-hmm. Changing the way things are. I have a desire, and so I'm going to choose to not accept that desire. I'm going to not go with it. How does that work within the framework of what you're talking about today?
Well, a couple of things about that. One is, if discipline is something that you're using to make yourself feel better about yourself, then you're using an antidote to what's coming up. Do you see what I'm saying? So something comes up and you apply the antidote, you avoid the sweets. Or maybe you apply another antidote. The urge to eat sweets comes up and you apply another antidote. You decide that instead of doing that, you'll get a cup of tea for someone. So you'll replace it with something positive. And so you see, that's all fine. You can live that way for all of your life. And in that way, you can neutralize these points of view that appear. However, the decision point is that the way you want to live your life? Or do you want to live your life as flawless wisdom? So that's the decision point. And the way those two things look is, say you want to eat your sweets, so then you start thinking about it. You start, oh, wow, that banoffee at the Tulsi, it looks so good. I don't just want one piece, I want the whole pan. But I don't want anybody to see me eat the whole pan, so I'll just order one piece here and I'll take the rest home and say it's for the sadhus. Whatever. I know what's going on. I know what's going on with that banoffee. So you see, and so that's one way of going about it. In this way, all the appearances are paid attention to, they're focused on. They're either held to and accepted or rejected in some way. However, the other way to go about it is that when these appearances come up, to maintain awareness, just to maintain the basis of awareness that is the sole source of all these appearances. and to become more and more familiar with that without these appearances distracting you from awareness. So what that means is that there isn't only the thought and its stirring, and that's all that's being paid attention to, but more and more there's ever-present awareness as that thought. So there's the presence of fully evident, flawless wisdom awareness as the source of that thought that's coming about. And in that, then, you have great freedom and liberty, whereas the other way, you only have the thoughts and connecting the dots, one thought to another, thought to thought, emotion to emotion, experience to experience, and a whole life based on that. In ever steady awareness, you gain more and more familiarity with that in a totally uncontrived way. Uncontrived means you don't put in any sort of structure, like I'm going to sit in ever steady awareness for 1 hour a day or 10 minutes a day or whatever it is. It's when whatever it is that is afflictive to you, or positive for that matter, when it comes up, to maintain awareness, to rely on awareness as the source of how the decision and wisdom is going to flow, rather than on the process of connecting the dots. And in that, you gain familiarity with awareness in a very natural way, one in which there's no falling back. So awareness just becomes more and more obvious, rather than getting into a state of awareness and then falling out of it. More and more it's seen that everything that appears, it is awareness, and it's not an intellectual process. It isn't like saying, I am awareness. Lots of people say that today. Oh yeah, I'm awareness. Everything's awareness. It's cool. I can do whatever I want, think whatever I want. But this is a grave misunderstanding. It's very distinct from actually abiding as awareness in complete perceptual openness in all experience. So it's as simple as this. You look at the menu, you see the banoffee, it doesn't make you feel good, and you have a sugar hangover or whatever it is, or maybe you gain weight too, and you feel bad about yourself, you feel guilty, you feel remorse for eating remorse and regret for what you've done, and this just goes on and on and on. But in awareness, all of the same things can go on, but you're not distracted by them. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's only in that we conclusively establish in our own being that everything is a single non-dual expanse. As long as we're saying, oh no, some things are impure, then we're saying it isn't a single non-dual expanse. Do you have another question about that?
No, you've answered it. Thank you.
When Heather spoke yesterday, she mentioned that you initially taught only people who were willing to teach themselves.
Oh,
Yeah, so this has obviously changed. Why did you take that point of view? Because I see it implies like a closed fist only, not an open hand. Whoever comes is welcome. Could you perhaps explain that change, if there was any?
well, there really isn't a change. What I would tell people is that I worked with very few people, first of all, so very few people did I have the honor and privilege of having this sort of relationship with. And so I would just, in the beginning, I just talked to anyone who wanted to talk to me. But I found that some people were really serious and others weren't. Some people just wanted to talk about it. They didn't really want to live as it. So then I started saying to people, well, a couple of things came about. One is that people would call me on the telephone and talk about all the appearances all the time, and they'd want to talk about that forever. So then I'd say, well, okay, I'm happy to listen for 3 minutes, but after 3 minutes, then I want you to tell me what the solution is. Because that's not what I'm available for. I'm available to completely be of service in a full and open-hearted way for anyone who wants to rest his awareness. And for anyone who wants to really gain familiarity with awareness, I and Great Freedom Teaching are available lifelong. Then the other thing that I started to share with people was that in order to be in this relationship with me, I wanted them to give up their right to be a victim of their points of view. So when we pay attention to our points of view, all the appearances, and we think they're all real, then what we're doing is making ourselves a victim of our own appearances. They're our own appearances. They can't be blamed on anyone else. So this was the other thing I suggested. At the time also I had other responsibilities, my family, etc. So yeah, it's just the way it is. This is the greatest love. The greatest love is to say to someone, give up your right to be a victim of your appearances. There's no greater love than that, to just say, give up your right to be a victim of that. If we play our lives out as a victim of our own appearances, then that's just going to be the way it is. But it's a choice. We have to make the decision whether we're going to hold to the appearances or not. Do you see what I'm saying? So what might look like a closed fist, it isn't really that at all. It's saying, I'm here for you forever. And there's no back door. I'm not going anywhere. But I will support you in what real love is. I'm not going to support you in fooling yourself.
You're also saying that this teaching is really very old, like you said, 17,000 years, and it is to be found in many cultures. Like way back in the 70s, 80s, when everyone was reading Carlos Castaneda, I had these really feelings that is really profound. The more the series progressed, I found this is really profound. You probably know the teachings of Don Juan. Would you say that that is also fitting into that tradition of pure non-dual teachings?
Carlos Castaneda?
Yes, the teachings of Don Juan.
Well, here's what I bring to anything I read. Is it unerring truth or not? And through reading it, will it actually create the certainty that someone is that? So many, many books are just about a topic. They're written by an author. It's an author writing about a certain topic, and it relates back to the experience of an individual person. However, there is writing in the world, and in the Great Freedom Teaching, the writing is like this. It doesn't refer back to anyone. It doesn't refer back to anyone. And unerringly, it states over and over again only the truth of what is in myriad ways. So in reading it and hearing it, it becomes more and more evident in our own being that that's what we are, and we can't really even say how that came about. I don't even remember Carlos Castaneda, to tell you the truth. No, because I would just go through books and I would highlight the things that were absolutely true. And in most books I'd find just a few things. However, there are things that are absolutely true, and there always have been. And before it was written down, before we learned to write, it was just orally passed along. So, this is the great wisdom of humankind, the great, great wisdom of humankind that requires no doing. You know, another way of talking about that is that there are many things written that point to something. It's the kind of writing that is about a topic. So it's about our true nature, writing that talks about our true nature. And when we read it, we might feel a little spark. Or when we're reading it, we may feel several sparks. Oh, yes, you know, there's something in this that is true. Then there's other writing when we read it, it's like, boom, I'm completely undone. You know, everything I thought about myself is undone. It's completely undone. And I don't know how that happened. So this is very important because these are two very distinct types of writing. One is the majestic lion's roar of the infinite vast expanse of awareness, and the other it's points of view about somebody's experience.
You mentioned a baby having like total awareness, and I'm thinking, well, does that change? Is there? I mean, I was a baby and now I'm a grown up. Is there any change in the awareness? Is there any development that happens? I mean, what happens?
Nothing. That was supposed to be a baby. Nothing.
Seems like something should happen between being a baby and not, you know, being who we are now.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like something has happened.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying nothing. Nothing happens.
No. Awareness is indestructible and unchanging, forever indestructible and unchanging. What appears in awareness is only awareness, never separate from it, never affecting it in any way. The idea that it has affected it in some way is just an idea. It's just another point of view.
There's no growth or expansion or anything like that?
There is the appearance of that. There's the appearance of that. But if we say we are talking about growth and expansion, and we think of it as something, that we're a human being, we're growing and we're expanding throughout our life. It is hoped we're growing and expanding throughout our life. And that's all we know about the growth and expansion. Then we only know it as a thing. We know it as a thing and we know ourselves as a thing. However, if about all those, us, our growth and our expansion, we know that they're vivid appearances of forever empty awareness, then we really understand what's going on. And we can just enjoy it as it is. We can just completely enjoy it and open to it in an everyday way, just as it is, without any need to change the appearances at all. We know more and more, we gain such trust and confidence in the flawless wisdom of indivisibility, the indivisibility of everything. We gain such confidence in that flawless wisdom that we always know we'll know what to do without thinking. Just in the same way a baby knows what to do without thinking. Something more?
Not at the moment.